Well, thanks, Mark and all his group for having and arranging this. This has been a real treat, and I hope going forward a lot more of this will happen. I think PEth is just taken off in its use, not only here and in the United States, but all around the world. Today I'm going to talk about a study that we did. We do a lot of different kinds of experiments with PEth, from basic research, pharmacokinetics, but also we're a support lab for people that do certain types of clinical studies. And today we just completed a study that was distracted, if you will, by COVID. And so I thought it would be interesting to see how Mike McDonald's group and our lab responded to the complete shutdown of an R21 exactly halfway through the time of the study. And so this is, the pointer is up at the top.
The red button.
The red button?
Yeah.
There we go. So this is Mike McDonald's group at the Washington State University, and they are experts in contingency management, which is a treatment program where you give positive feedback to people that want to change their behavior. And then our group, of course, is in San Antonio in the lab. So there are four things I'll talk quickly about today. The first is a brief description of this, and then this Tasso device, which is a device that Mike McDonald discovered, and we've used and we've validated its measurement of PEth against liquid blood measurements. And then describe our PEth assay, and then I'll give the results of an individual patient and point out what I think are interesting parts of that particular profile. So contingency management is a monetary reward for reduced drinking. It's been shown with cocaine, the heaviest cocaine user, you can stop their cocaine use dead in your tracks if you pay them enough money. And so that's the idea that's been applied to this particular study. These are sorry, that's a little bitty red button.
Marty, you can also use the down arrow on the keypad if you like.
Okay, I'll try my skills at the puncher one more time. So these are treatment seekers, and the thing that's most important about this is that it's an individualized program. And I have a strong feeling about two things with PEth. One is that no single measurement at any one point in time should ever be used to incriminate anyone of anything. I believe multiple measurements over time are very important. And the second thing is that there's a lot of variability between subjects. All of the studies you've seen this morning are comparing between subject means and things like that, tendencies. But when you do within subject repeated measures, you eliminate most of that variability. At least that's my opinion. Available for more discussion. So the inclusion criteria in this study were that the person had to have a PEth level greater than 20. And we measured 3 outcome measures: reported drinking using the timeline file back. And importantly, this was a visit between Rachel Beck, who did the study management, where she met with them every single week and did the timeline file back only for a single week. And then, of course, whole blood PEth and urinary uEtG. And it was observed with a dipstick test, and so it was either a positive or a negative test above or below 300 nanograms per ml. And we discovered one very interesting thing that I think allows us to estimate drinking within the last 2 or 3 days by this urinary uEtG test. And then the monetary reward contingency was to reduce PEth level from the previous visit. So the point of PEth in this study was to determine whether the contingency management was given to the subject as evidence of reduced drinking. So this is just a schematic of the same thing that I just told you. At the bottom of the page, however, it shows that if a PEth level is above the previous PEth level from the previous visit, then the reward is withheld and the person gets knocked back down to the start. And each positive visit, there's a little increase in the monetary reward. So this is the Tasso device. There are other devices to collect things, but the difference between this one is that I think the injection of the needle into the arm versus a person doing their own finger stick is a little more reliable. You can let me know what you think. So this is the device. The big button here is where you push the needle into the arm. The blood flows into these. There are two types of collectors. One is for whole blood and the other is for dried blood. This is the kit that comes with us. There's adhesive to hold the Tasso in place, a button for lancing the upper arm, and then 4 cartridges, we call them plugs, that hold about 20 microliters each. And then it's put in the box and shipped. I should point out there are other kits that are set up in pretty much the same way. So just quickly, you rub the arm vigorously, peel the adhesive off the back so the Tasso sticks on the upper arm. You compress the button. Capillary blood takes 2 to 5 minutes to fill these compartments sequentially. And you remove the Tasso from the arm, let the cartridge dry, stick it in the box, and send it. And these are what the little, I call them plugs, they're little cylindrical shapes. And they're absorbent plugs similar to spot cards. And each plug saturates with about 20 microliters. We did an experiment where we gave increasing amounts and found out where it levels off. It was about 27 microliters to saturate. And we used 2 plugs for test, isopropanol extraction, calibrator curve, made from liquid blood and put on the plugs. And then we did a validation study, and we took 14 samples from previous study that had a variety of levels of PEth already measured. And we thawed the samples and measured liquid blood and blood placed on dried blood plugs to see how they compared. And the calibrator samples were naive blood spiked with analytical standard. And then we compared the calculated PEth with the liquid blood PEth. And these are the other collection kits that are dependent on finger sticks, but there are others out there. And these are the results of the validation, so-called validation experiment. The left graph shows PEth with the liquid blood method, and the y-axis is liquid PEth levels with the Tasso plug method. You can see the slope of the curve is 1.04. And this slide on the right is, these data are simply this little flock of PEth levels there at the bottom, and the slope was 0.96. So we feel like our measures are accurate. Now these are results of a single patient who was in the contingency management part, not treatment as usual. And on the right axis is the daily self-report, timeline follow back. So each of these vertical lines is the number of drinks. And you can see that this person came into the study with pretty heavy drinking. And also it appears that their drinking occurred in a batch, what do you call it? Just drinking on the weekends. A binge method. And then the rest of the slide, this is PEth 16-0-18-1, the blue dots. The orange dots are 18-2, and the gray is 24. And the green is ETG. So if you'll notice, let's go to the ETG first. You see 1 day of abstinence, 1 day where probably 2 drinks were consumed, and the ETG PEth was still negative at less than 300. It might have been 200 or 250, but it was less than 300. And then the patient continued to drink, did not receive the contingency, but then At this point in time, which was day 0 of the study, their PEth level went down at day 7, and so they received the contingency. The urinary ethG flipped down to a negative test. And for the rest of the study, except for a couple days where the patient had maybe 1 drink in that day, everything fell off. And it is interesting to me see the different rates between the different time points that in some very small way match what John pointed out earlier. But I love the idea of doing a PEth measurement once a week because it corresponds to the half-life, the average half-life of PEth. And if someone had a PEth at 100 and the next week it was 50, that's pretty solid evidence, I think, that the drinking has been non-existent during that time. So just to conclude, I think we've demonstrated that this Tasso, and by the way, disclaimer, I have no stock in the company. It wasn't me that found it, but I think it might be a useful tool in a couple ways. The Tasso was validated, virtual visits during COVID. This is what enabled the study to be completed. When we hit COVID, our lab, we were only allowed 1 person in every day. We have 3 labs, and so 1 person in each lab, they masked, never crossed. But it stopped the in-person visits. And so we had to figure out a way to do it, and we were able to do that. And final conclusions, as I said earlier, I think within subject PEth measurements are going to be in the short term, one of the most valuable ways to use phosphatidylethanol for treatment especially. And I think the combination of urinary ethG, and for all 14 subjects, it was pretty clear, I don't have data compiled to show it, it was pretty clear that if there were 3 days of abstinence, the urinary ethG flipped from positive to negative. And combined, but the PEth levels could still be way up high. And so the 2 measurements I thought were very good. So that's it. That's all I got. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you, really interesting. Do you know the stability of those plugs? Does the blood really dry all the way out and is it the same as DBS?
The drying time?
No, just long term. Do you think, if you went back and tested them 6 months later, would you get the same
Yeah.
PEth levels?
We haven't even been doing them 6 months, so the answer to your question is no, but we will do that. Mike is writing another program, another grant, and so hopefully we'll get another chance to do more.
Thanks, Mike, for a nice presentation. Did you have, let's say, user experiences with the Tasso device? We also used several of those and saw that there were quite some failures in which actually not all tips were filled. So did you have technical failures? Could you comment on that?
Yes, I can answer that. There were some of the subjects where only 2 plugs were filled. And so there is an issue there for flow and capillary flow out of the arm that needs to be dealt with, absolutely. But that's what we did with this study. If we didn't have 2 plugs, then we didn't conduct the measurement of PEth levels.
Thank you.
How did you prepare the calibrators? Were you buying the plugs from the company?
2 things I should say about the Tasso Incorporated company. One is that device costs $25 for academic, and that's expensive, relatively. However, its usefulness by the people that are in the study was very, very good, very easy. The other thing, we asked them for 500 plugs so we could build the calibrator curves. And there's one salesperson that's in Washington State who said absolutely and send 500 plugs to Washington State. The guy in Texas said, I talked to our higher ups, said, no way, you're gonna have to buy Tasso kits, pull the plugs out, and do calibrator. So that's where we stand. We're gonna figure out a way to make it work. I'm taking too much time.
As Christophe already said, we are also working with the Tasso devices, and what we actually try to do is to circumvent the use of multiple types of calibration curves, because you use pumps and you use Tasso devices. We try to actually set up a calibration model with which we can actually use the VAMs as calibrators on VAMs and quantify reliably the Tasso devices. So we actually make a mathematical calculation to recalculate back to what it would be just because of the difference of the device.
I see.
That's how we try to circumvent making both VAMs and Tasso calibrators for just doing the same.
Yeah, okay. One thing I thought about it while I was here, and when I get back, I think we're gonna start routinely weighing each plug, just to see if they're tightly saturated in the same low CV percent.
When do you weigh it? When you weigh plugs with the plugs?
Say it again?
You weigh the plugs?
We're gonna start weighing them when they're still, when we get them. Well, in our research, we're gonna weigh them to see if when it's liquid, what the weight is, just out of curiosity, you know. It's about saturation. I think it's important to know that the plugs are saturated.
Okay.
If you have a good idea, let me